This week we are going to learn about the origins of language. It is really interesting to discuss and to question when was language originated. When was it the first time that humans started using language? We have Charles Darwin, very famous for his theory of evolution. According to Charles Darwin, earlier humans had already developed a kind of musical abilities prior to language. And they were actually, according to Charles Darwin, they were using this music to charm each other. I know that it's difficult for us to imagine our ancestors that way, because we know that our ancestors were not that charming. We usually think of them as, rough characters wearing animal skins, don't we? However, Darwin's thoughts is an interesting speculation, although it is without any convincing evidence. We simply do not know for sure how and when language originated. However, we do know that the ability to produce sound and vocal patterning appears to be in an ancient part of the brain. We suspect that some form of spoken language must have been developed between, let's say, 100,000 to 50,000 years ago. So some form of spoken language. You know that the language that we know today in its written form is much younger. It is not more than 5,000 years ago. So we have our written form evolved roughly around 5,000 years ago. Among the early traces of life on Earth, we do not have any direct evidence of language or spoken language, simply because spoken language does not leave behind any fossil for us so that we can analyze later. Therefore, there are plenty of speculations, there are plenty of assumptions about the origins of human language, about the origins of spoken language, if you like. So, one of the speculations is divine source. And what is that? So, one of the speculations is, as I was saying, that the divine source. So, the first one thing, that the divine source. According to biblical traditions, as it is described in the book of Genesis, God created Adam, and whatsoever Adam called every living creature around him, that was the name thereof. However, there are other traditions, such as according to Hindu religion, language came from Saraswati, wife of Brahma, who according to Hindu traditions, Hindu believes that Brahma is the creator of the universe, and his wife Saraswati is the source of language. In most religions, there appears to be a divine source of language. However, sometimes people actually try to do some experiments. They try to find out the source of the language, or the original divine language. The basic hypothesis behind such experiments and such studies is that if human babies are allowed to grow up without any language around them, then perhaps they would use the original God-given language. So according to the evidences that we have, the first such experiment was reported by this Greek writer Herodotus. I hope I'm getting the spelling right. Herodotus. He reported that an Egyptian pharaoh named Psammetichus. Egyptian pharaoh Psammetichus, he experimented first roughly around 2,500 years ago. What Psammetichus did? Psammetichus took two human infants in isolations, and they were not in contact with any human. Rather, they grew up with goats. And after 2 years, it was found that the babies were producing the first sound, which sounds like bekos. So the sound, according to bekos, that was the word that was produced by the babies in his experiment, and which means in fact bread. But bekos, mind it, is not an Egyptian word. It's a Phrygian word, Phrygian, Phrygian. Now this prompted Semiticus to believe that the God-given divine language was Phrygian. But as you can assume that this cannot be true, because the sound bekos, kos is a Greek ending which might have added in the Greek version of the story. If you remove kos, you have this sound be. And indeed, do you hear the goat? Because goats say bay. So the bay or be. So that is the sound they actually acquired from the goats, and that has nothing to do with divinity or the original divine language. Similar experiments were also conducted by another human, another someone who was very much interested in the divine source of languages. King James IV, King James the Fourth, from Scotland, he did a similar experiment roughly around 1,500 years ago. And he reported that in his study, human babies ended up speaking Hebrew, and that actually consolidated his belief in the divine source or the divine language. He believed that indeed Hebrew was the divine language of the Garden of Eden. But as we know, we do not have convincing evidences, because we know that children who are growing, most of the children who we have found later, who are growing up in isolations in jungles, they did not speak Hebrew. Therefore, we can say that these were mere speculations. Okay, this is about the divine source of language that people believed, but you can see that we do not have much convincing evidence. The second explanation or proposal that we have is the natural sound source. And what we understand and what does it propose is, the proposal is the earliest words was actually derived from imitations of natural sounds. For example, when an object flew by making a caw-caw sound, for example, early humans perhaps used this sound to refer to that object, right? So the argument is that the source of early human languages, or the spoken languages, or the sound, is indeed in the natural world. Now, you can see that all modern languages have words which echo the naturally occurring sound, and perhaps this evidence is used to support the argument that human language originated from natural sound sources. We have sounds in English such as hiss, yes, so hiss, or screech, or we have bang sound. These sounds, you see that they sounds, these words and the sound, they have some sort of kind of connection, and they are connected. This view that human speech sound originated from the natural world is called the bow-wow theory, borrowing the term from the natural sound bow-wow theory. And the name bow-wow theory was coined by Max Muller. So bow-wow theory by Max Muller. Let's say it is interesting theory, but what about words which has a kind of abstract meaning? So naturally occurring sounds probably can account for objects or for the nouns, but what about the verbs? What about actions, and what about abstract ideas and concepts? how do they sound in the natural world? We have no explanations. It has also been suggested that the original sound of language have come from natural cries of emotion, such as pain and anger and joy, sounds such as oof or ouch. These sounds, these sound, according to one argument, that they were the source of early human speech. But if you examine carefully, you will see that these sounds are usually produced, the sounds expressing the interjection sounds expressing human joy and pain. They are usually produced with an intake of the breath. But normally and generally, speech sounds are produced with exhaled breath, and we do not see the kind of expressive noises people make in emotional reactions. They are not used in speech production. So it's up to you now to whether you actually agree with this proposal that human speech sound originated from the natural world. There are some expressions and words in every languages, in every modern languages. We call them onomatopoeic words, and they are very few in numbers. All right. We're going to look at and discuss the third source or the third proposal. The third proposal, which is what we call the social interaction source. I find it interesting. It has a theory too, okay? And the theory, it says that ye he ho theory rather. Ye he ho theory. The idea is the sounds of a person involved in physical effort could be source of all language. Our ancestors, when they were trying to do something very effortful, for example, lifting a big branches of a tree or carrying the dead body of a giant beast, perhaps they made some grunts and noises and curses. Therefore, they could have been very well the sources of human language. And this one is probably more sensible if we think of human effort which is required, a coordinated effort required for doing something big. And this proposal, it has an interesting appeal since it includes the social aspect of language development. Indeed, language evolved as a result of social interactions in large groups. However, we can see that yes, people, a lot of people, a group of people were trying to do something together, and they made sounds together because they wanted to give a coordinated effort in lifting the tree or putting pressure on something. However, this has criticisms too. Let us look at other animals. Apes, they also have developed sounds such as grunts and cries, and they also live in a social setup. They have a kind of group, but they haven't developed the capacity for speech. Therefore, it is highly unlikely that just because humans were living in a social group and interacting with cries and grunts, that could have been the source or that could have originated the language. So, we are going to look at and understand the next source, or the next explanations that we have for the origins of language. They call the physical adaptation. Number 4, right? Yes. The physical. Okay. So, instead of looking at the types of sounds as the source of human speech, we may look at the types of physical features that human possess. Features that are distinct from other creatures. Let's start with the observation that at some early stage, our ancestors made a significant transition to an upright posture, standing on 2 feet and adapting different roles for the front leg. Such changes may have triggered other changes. For example, we see a marked difference between the skull of a gorilla and that of a Neanderthal man from around 60,000 years ago. We also see features in skeletal structures resembling modern human in fossils from 35,000 years ago. So what does it mean? By themselves, such features would not be necessarily lead to speech production, but they provide us important clues. How? If we look at what we call organs of speech of human species, let's look at teeth. Unlike other creatures, other primates, human teeth is upright and they are not slanted like apes. They are also roughly even. They are not suitable for tearing or ripping food, but they are only suitable for chewing and grinding. It makes sense to think that such features and human teeth was helpful in making sounds such as fa sound and va sound. Another important characteristics of human organs of speech is the characteristics or the qualities of human lips. Human lips are more flexible than other primates, and it enables us to produce sounds such as ba and ba. Human mouth is smaller than other primates, and it can be opened and stopped rapidly for producing sounds and for shaping the speech and shaping the flow that comes from the lung. Human tongue is thicker and smaller and muscular, and it can shape a wide variety of sounds. In addition, the location of human larynx, or what you call a voice box, is significantly different from the larynx of other primates such as monkeys. In the course of human physical development, the larynx dropped a lower position, dropped to a lower position, creating a longer cavity called pharynx acts as a resonator, giving clarity to sounds produced by the larynx and the vocal tract. That's all about the physical adaptation source. Okay, so another explanations that we have about the origin of human language is what we call the tool making source. The argument is manual gesture may have been used before human learned to use language. We have evidences which suggest that by about 2 million years ago, humans had developed their preferential right-handedness and were capable of making tools from stones. Eventually, they started making tools from wood and also composite tools by combining wood and stones. Now, the question is, how is this ability of tool making is related to the ability of language? Or how is this ability to make tools is linked with origins of language? Let us look at this way. Human brain is not only large relative to human body size, it is also lateralized. That is, the two hemispheres, left hemisphere and right hemispheres in human brain have specialized functions that control motor movements involved in speaking and tool making are very close to each other in the left hemisphere. Some believe there is a connection between tool making and language using ability. So tool making ability actually led to or paralleled with language ability. For example, the most primitive tools perhaps used only a single stone. Similarly, a single sound was actually used to identify an object. Gradually, as humans developed more sophisticated tools by combining different stones, more stones and more materials, probably they have also started developing some sophisticated language, combining different sounds to make words, and by combining words into sentences or sentence structures. So the last argument that we have is the genetic source. The genetic source to understand this, think of human baby. Think of human baby in its first few years of growing up. At birth, the brain of the baby is only a quarter of its eventual weight. The larynx is much higher in the throat, but in a relatively short period of time, the larynx descends, the brain develops, the child assumes an upright posture and starts walking and talking. Even children who are born deaf become fluent in sign languages. Now, this seems to indicate that human babies are born with a special capacity for language. That is, human babies are born with an innate ability to learn language. This is known as innateness hypothesis. As we consider this hypothesis, we find our speculations about the origins of language. We can see it is moving away from initially the divine intervention. We have moved away from the divine intervention to physical adaptation source, and then to fossil evidence and to genetic superiority. If indeed we are the only creature on planet Earth with the capacity for language, then will it be completely impossible for any other creatures to produce or understand language? We have to think about it. Now, we have so far discussed the origins of language. Now you have to find out and you have to decide for yourself which explanations and which source that you would believe in or you would accept. So I would request you to visit our channel, and if you like our channel, if you have learned something from these video clips, please subscribe to our channel. The channel is LEL, so please subscribe to our channel. Thank you very much.